Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here on this 29th, Thursday, the 29th of February, 2024. I have a feeling that we're right on the edge, right on the verge of a monstrously large problems within the Main Street financial part of the economy. And to point this out is you got all these empty office buildings. It says why all these empty office buildings are posing a major threat to the economy. But now it's starting to move into the apartment owners and foreclosures. And look here, it says Houston apartment owner loses 3,200 units in a foreclosure. But this is just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg of these foreclosures starting. And they're also apartment owners and stuff now are starting to try to attract people. You know, a lot of people, they just can't make it. Starting to live out of their cars. So when a person's living out of a car because they lost their job or their employment isn't making enough money to cover the rent and food, and they choose food, and so they have a car, so they move into their car, then they're not renting that place any longer. The apartment goes vacant. How then that in turn is going to make it so that these landlords are going to be able to satisfy the bank, especially when they have to turn over their whole thing, their whole mortgage is maybe they have to turn that over and refinance. And they used to be able to refinance at less than 3%. Now they're going to have to pay more than 7%. And they're just not making it. And their banks are foreclosing. And then what happens then? You know, I mean, and it's just the whole situation starting to spiral out of control bit by bit. See, it says here, office tenants are looking for concessions from landlords beyond deals on rent. Renters are starting to get concessions from landlords. These are the effects of landlord concessions have on apartment rents. Tenants get more concessions in these articles here, you know. Price of rent surged for 27 months straight. Is relief finally coming? You're going to have to pay concessions as landlords compete for office tenants, etc. It's starting to move in this direction. And then we have people living in vehicles now, and this is a massively growing trend. Not just living in vehicles, a lot of them are having to go homeless. They're listing on here on the internet, actually, listing what people need to do. First, number one, find a suitable car. It says you can only live in your car successfully if your car works. It says number two, before you start living in your car, use your permanent address to rent a post office box or a private mailbox. 3, keep your personal identification, driver's license, car insurance currently at all times. Buy a steering column lock and use it, it says. Imagine a guy, he's living in a car, and the car's like 15 years old, all covered with dents and rust and everything else. Buy a steering column lock. I remember just a few years ago, the only cars you'd have to be worried about theft was cars that were like, I don't know, if you had an Audi or a Porsche or something like that, you know, just a few years ago. Now, doesn't matter. Could be the worst beat up old car with dents all over it, and they'll steal it. So that's what's happening. I mean, we're moving in that direction. See this woman here? She says, I've been living on the road by myself for 2 years. Here's 12 things I wish I'd known ahead of time. And she's living in that car. It's like a very small car, too. It's better than being totally homeless, so I'll just say that much about it. You know, in the end, look, I don't care. Right now, you might have, I don't know, $1 million in the bank. Your house 3/4 paid for. You own your own car. You own everything. You know, and you've got a lot of money put away. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to end up like this, homeless. Because of the direction this thing's going. This is the way the tide's going. You say, how? If I got all that money and I got a house and I got a car and I got $1 million in the bank, how am I going to be homeless? Just watch. That's what hyperinflation can do. First off, your $1 million, hyperinflation can basically take that away from you. Costs can go so high on things. And everything else can turn south and turn sour. You can lose your job or lose your pension fund. You lose your means of support. Prices go up on everything. And maybe you'll be a little bit further into this thing before you'll become homeless. And a lot of the early ones now are becoming homeless. People who are right now are not set up. They haven't got $1 million in the bank. They haven't got this. They haven't got that. Well, they're going first. But it's going to make its way upwards as this thing progresses. This is a monster that's coming now. This is an absolute monster. It's going to make the Great Depression of the 1930s look like tiddlywinks. But it hasn't completely struck yet, you know. And the Federal Reserve is so far behind the curve. They're still talking of, while this thing's progressing in the system, like a poison taking over the system, this deflationary funk, they're sitting there and they're actually thinking about holding interest rates high or keeping them high. They should be dropping them right now to try to get ahead of this thing, because this is a monster. But they've stimulated this thing into happening. And maybe you guys don't know what I'm talking about by this thing. Well, you're soon going to know. It's a depression. But it's unlike the depression of the 1930s. This is going to be a hyperinflationary. That was a deflationary depression. It was when your money became worth more during the 1930s. You know, people would work all day for $1 back then because money becomes so valuable. U.S. dollar. This is just exactly the opposite. This is a hyperinflationary depression where the dollar's value goes down and down and down, and people just can't afford their means of life any longer. It says, who could be next? Top Canadian pension fund sells Manhattan office tower for $1, sparking fire sale panic. New York, during the inflationary surge of the 1970s and 80s, was a mythical place where one could purchase Park Avenue penthouse for $1, while assuming the copious debt, of course. Now, thanks to the brutal bear hug of the highest interest rates in 40 years and an ongoing CRE crisis, those legendary days have made a comeback in the Big Apple, if only in the realm of commercial real estate for now. That's it. That's the key word, for now. Commercial real estate for now. Starting in commercial real estate. But you know it's going to extend outwards from this. This is growing. Now, also at the same time, we're going to be facing food crises. And food shortages and things are coming to a store near you. Now look at that shelf there. 1 per customer, please. If there's one reality that Americans need to accept, it's that every system has a breaking point and there are no exceptions. Human beings are built to adapt, and this has given us incredible resilience. I totally agree with that. But it also means we have a tendency to wait too long to fix the parts of our society that are broken. Instead, we let the problems build and fester until sadly the final straw falls and everything comes crashing down. Been the case all the way through history. It talks about the just-in-time structure is the lifeblood of the supply chain, and most American cities would fall into chaos after 1 week without it. Trains and railway networks handle around 28% of the total freight, and have struggled through the long state of decline. There is no realistic alternative to trucks. Shows you the power the truckers have, really, if they wanted to use that power. You know, the truckers actually have the power. They have more power than anybody within government if they really were to band together and use the power that they have. Because they've got the whole country over a barrel. If they don't deliver, the country doesn't run. It's as simple as that. You know? And, you know, I consider truckers salt of the earth, you know, and if you guys don't know what that means, I consider them to be the backbone of America. They're the real working class man. They're the heart of the entire middle class structure. Wonderful. Love my truckers out there. You guys do a great job for America, for Canada. Look here in Canada here, how nervous the government and stuff got when the truckers were upset. Because they know the power the truckers have. And so they used overwhelming force to try to quash it, and they did quash it. But it was like using an atomic bomb on... It was the nuke option. Let's just put it that way. What they did, you know. Anyway, Moscow vows to respond to Sweden's NATO accession. What are they going to do? It says Russia will take measures against Sweden following its accession to NATO. Russian foreign minister said on Wednesday. Sweden on Monday cleared the final hurdle to become the 32nd member of the United States-led military alliance. Wonder what the Russians are going to do. Meanwhile, Putin has said, he's warned, that sending Western troops to Ukraine risks a global nuclear conflict. Putin's warning come in a State of the Nation address ahead of the next month's election. He is all but certain to win, underlining his readiness to protect Russian gains in Ukraine. Russia's got like 6,000 nuclear weapons. That would be not only one for every major city of the West. That would be one for every major city of the West and every small town and hamlet. Israel-Gaza war. More than 100 killed as crowd waits for aid. So here they are. They're sitting there and they're waiting to have some food for the first time in gosh knows how long. Man, they must be super hungry. It says more than 100 Palestinians are reported to have been killed while waiting for food or aid to be delivered in northern Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry blamed Israeli forces, and Palestinian media cited medical sources saying Israel's troops fired at the crowd that were waiting to eat. And evidently 100 of them have been killed while they were waiting for food. Now, today, the silver price is up 16 cents at $22.60. So we're seeing silver starting to go up just a little bit. And gold's at $20.47. Gold's up pretty good. $13.30 is quite a little bounce for gold. But this is nothing. This is nothing compared to what Bitcoin's been doing recently. To think, you know, you could have had them for like $14,000. You could have bought a whole Bitcoin there not that long ago. So you could have bought two of them for like $28,000. Right? And today, look what they're worth. $62,837 each. Ethereum, $34.62. And XRP, 60.9 cents. So Bitcoin's on a tear right now. I always thought that when the time come and we started to make that transition toward hyperinflation. Now, we're not even to the acceleration phase yet of a hyperinflation, but we're making that transition where people are starting to get nervous about the purchasing power of their dollars. That's the transition period. We're in a transition period. And that's the period where alternatives to the dollar people start to notice some more. Now, this only gets worse as time progresses. There's stages to all of this. When we get in the acceleration phase, which is right ahead of us, then there's going to be a massive move into alternatives to the dollar. Alternative assets that are liquid. Being very specific here. The dollar is a liquid asset. Okay? There's very few other liquid assets that are alternatives to the dollar that are not paired with the dollar. You've only got cryptocurrencies and gold and silver and a few other precious metals like palladium and platinum and stuff like that. Copper, a few other things. But there's very few alternatives to the dollar. Now, these alternatives to the dollar are going to move in the opposite direction from the dollar when the dollar starts to go into the acceleration phase. That's when it becomes obvious. Everything becomes obvious to everybody at that point when we go into the acceleration phase. We're not in there yet. When the acceleration phase hits, that's when you're going to see massive inflation start to hit. And that's the first stage of the hyperinflation. We have to go through that acceleration phase. So, these alternatives to the dollar during this period in time forward, where I think we're starting to get into the period now before the acceleration phase where people are their heads are starting to turn and they're starting to say, hey, you know what? I can't save in dollars anymore. It's useless. I don't get any interest and inflation's eating away my purchasing power. I mean, anybody that's got a brain is going to figure that out. Some people it takes a bit longer, but by the time we get to the acceleration phase, everybody's going to know that, and they're going to be panicking. So we're only moving in that direction now. The same way with old people, you know. They talk about cognitive decline. This is a similar thing where you're moving in one direction towards something. And unless something happens to turn you away from it, and with an old person with cognitive decline, nothing's going to turn them away from that. That's a progressive thing, you know. It's not pretty to see. You know, I watched it happen with my father. It's scary when a person gets cognitive decline. But it progresses in one direction. The financial system's for me, it's a no-brainer. It's easy for me to predict where all this is going. Just like I can look at certain people that remain nameless right now that are in the progressing cognitive decline of old age. It's only going to get worse. It ain't going to get better. Anyway, let's move on here. 38,971. And so we're seeing the Dow Jones is up by 22 points. And you know, when we get into these hyperinflationary scenarios, even in the early stages, in the acceleration phase, we're going to see the stock market hyperinflate as well. What does that mean? It means that there's no upper limit to how a stock market that's in a hyperinflating economy, generally they're the best performing stock markets in the world. We already might be seeing some of this, you know, because we were expecting this decline in the markets that never materialized. That's because the markets might actually be moving in this direction toward a hyperinflationary stock market. Does that mean that the stock market's making you money? No, not if the dollar's losing 50% of its value daily. Then if the stock market's only going up by 25%, you're losing 25%. It still ain't making nothing, you know. But just saying, guys, it's all relative, you know. But so the Dow Jones today is up 22 points. We're looking at crude oil today. It's down 3 cents at 78.51 today. Taking a look at bonds and rates today, and we're looking at fallen yields. The U.S. 10-year has fell 4.2 basis points to 4.23, and the U.S. 30-year has fell 4.3 basis points to 4.36. And finishing off with the dollar index today is at 103.91. Okay, 103.97. Take a look. There we go. Okay, it's going along sideways today. It's going up right now, but it's still going along sideways today. If it continues that move upwards, maybe it's climbing today. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. And have a great afternoon, guys. Bye-bye.